Can we get started now?
Yeah, people are coming into the room.
Okay, but we'll let them settle in. I see the numbers increasing.
Yeah.
Want to make sure that Natalie's with us too. And we are recording now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to send Dr. Walra the password.
Okay.
Hi, Natalie. I see your message. You can't start your video. You're in
Yeah.
panelist mode. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm so sorry.
You're good. It just says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. So I'm not sure why, but if I'm camera off, that's the reason.
You can do it now, Natalie. Ready to get started, Maria?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining the Job Creating Application webinar. My name is Maria Linares, and I serve as the Business Initiatives Manager at Orange County Business Council. OCBC serves as the regional convener for the California Jobs First initiative in Orange County, bringing together key stakeholders to drive inclusive economic development. I'm joined today by Jesse Benron, our Vice President of Business Initiatives, Dr. Wallace Walrod, Chief Economic Advisor, and Natalie Nguyen with Charitable Ventures, who serves as the fiscal agent for California Jobs First in the Orange County region. Jesse, do you think you could share slides, please?
Yep. Pull it up one moment.
Thank you. We'll go to the next slide, Jesse. Thank you so much. So in today's session, we're going to walk all of you through everything you need to know about the funding opportunity. So what it is, who it's for, and how you can apply for funding to support job creating projects in Orange County. We'll cover the California Jobs First objectives, the different phases of funding, what kind of industries and projects qualify, the scoring criteria, and the application process. We'll also go over key deadlines, available resources, and information about grant mentorship support to help you submit the strongest possible application. And of course, we'll leave time for questions so you can walk away feeling confident. I welcome you to add your questions in the Q&A portion of this webinar. We'll get to them at the end of the presentation. And I'll also be sharing this presentation after the webinar, so please expect an email from me. The webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our Jobs First webpage in the next few days. And friendly reminder that we will not be covering or answering questions about the community enhancing application. The webinar for that project category will be held on Friday, February 21st at 9 a.m. And then I'd like to remind you that none of the webinars are a requirement to apply for Catalyst funding, and all webinars are optional. Now, with that being said, we'll move on to the next slide and pass it on to Jesse, where he'll go over the California Jobs First objectives.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for your interest in this grant proposal. So to take a step back, because I think, there's a lot in the RFP or the NOFO, but so there's this California Jobs First. This is the broader statewide initiative. We will drill down to kind of the grant funding specifically, which is the Regional Investment Initiative and Catalyst. So but it all starts here. So the broader picture is the state is working on how do we promote equitable and sustainable economic development. So if you look at the NOFO, a lot of it is kind of driven around that. How are we supporting inclusive economic planning that focuses on good paying jobs? So that economic planning has primarily been done. And then third is how are we going to align and leverage federal state funding to maximize economic resilience? That is what the state is trying to do broadly. There aren't very many, kind of arrows in their quiver at this point. The Regional Investment Initiative and Catalyst is the primary one, but they're going to build their way to this. And if you also see in your NOFO, priority 3 is written in there to see to what degree are some of your ideas and your projects could be funded when against implementation. So we're not just funding pre-development, although we are specifically with this funding, but we ultimately want to see the project be implemented and have it have an impact in our communities. So this is the broader Jobs First objectives. And now we're going to kind of drill in a little bit deeper as we keep going. Part of the Jobs First objective, just to put on people's radar, is there is implementation funding, but that'll come directly from the state. So again, our focus will be on pre-development or pre-implementation. But I would just keep on everyone's radar, and trust me, we're going to push out as soon as we get it as well, that there will be implementation funding available, but that's coming directly from the state. It'll be approximately $50 million a year each time over 3 years. People within all throughout the state of California can apply for this funding, but the project will need to receive support from the local regional collaborative. I don't want to go into too much of that. It's a lot of that information is on our website, and Maria did an informational webinar broadly about the Regional Investment Initiative, and it is going to be tied to the state economic blueprint. So that's all going to come out together. The state economic blueprint and the implementation funding RFP or NOFO, whatever the language the state likes to use, that's coming pretty soon. Again, Q1 of 2025. So just be on the lookout for that if you have implementation ready projects. So we wanted to kind of plug it now since we have a captive audience. So our focus now is going to be on Catalyst funding, which is already kind of in Orange County and available in Orange County, which you are all kind of on this webinar for the first round. So round 1, there'll be 3 million available. The funding is, again, around pre-development or pre-implementation. So I think as you think about this, know that that's where your projects have to be. It's not implementation ready projects, which is very foreign because almost all grants are focused on implementation ready projects. But the uniqueness, the unprecedented nature of this grant is that the state recognized and has then given money to each region that there are so many projects that aren't even ready for implementation funding. Therefore, let's expand the pipeline, so to speak. Let's get more projects ready for implementation so they can get more federal dollars or state dollars to be able to receive to actually do the work. You're kind of disadvantaging large groups of people by not allowing them to kind of move up the pre-development pipeline. So that's kind of the intent of this. I kind of will probably repeat myself a lot. If you send an implementation project, it's not going to probably even be scored, let alone funded. So do not send implementation ready projects. We have like a list, an explanation of what pre-development activities are. Through this PowerPoint, you saw there's a long, not only do we explain it, there's also a long list of what pre-development activities are. So please refer to that. But I want to drive the point home. We are not funding implementation ready projects with these dollars. With this webinar being focused on good paying jobs, these are the industries that we're focused on. I would say that we're going to be as inclusive as we can within reason, or liberal as we can within reason. You don't really have to have the right NAICS code nailed down, because to be honest, the state kind of gave us some of this language and they haven't told us. So NAICS codes are strict classifications of what these industries are. I think if there's a reasonable justification that what you're doing is in advanced manufacturing, you make that claim, we'll consider it as we kind of score your application. So these industries were selected by the collaborative work that's been done, 2 years up to this point. But our focus will be on these industries. The collaborative said these are industries that they care about. Therefore, we are going to fund projects that advance these industries. So again, the list is there. And I think some of these are very obvious, but just know that if you can make a strong justification that your project is advancing this industry, we're not going to have a fine line that's not quite advanced manufacturing per our definition. One thing that is important in all this, and you've seen that language, is good paying jobs. So we have to elevate it. So not only is job creation important, it very much is, every job is important to the person who has it. However, we, through the state's work, is funding good paying jobs. And this definition is kind of unique to Orange County. So as you think about the job creation that could come from your projects, just be clear that, They have to be over $40,353 a year. If you think about what those income or those earnings would be, that they have to be kind of employer sponsored. There has to be employer sponsored healthcare. Or I put / can afford healthcare coverage because, you know, if you're a small business, if you're a micro enterprise, you know, you have to be able to go get it in the marketplace. It's not provided from your employer because you are your employer. So there's kind of wiggle room for that. We have to make sure that there's full-time work, that you're working 35 hours a week. So it's not maybe a great hourly rate, but then you're working intermittently, and also, you know, full year appointment, that it's not seasonal work. That you're making a lot of money over the summer and then you're not making any money with these jobs over the next 9 months, or the job goes away, let's say, over the next 9 months. So those are all things that we have to, when you are writing your applications and we are using the terms, we want to see good paying jobs, you have to show us that these are the type of jobs that would be created through this project. And that's kind of the standard here. Project phases, this is not an absolute, but we do want to kind of provide a framework for you. We understand that, you know, pre-development or pre-implementation, that there could be something like almost like, I just have a great idea, I need to explore it more, I need to write a business plan, I need to kind of talk to certain people to understand kind of what that would look like. And that's kind of the concept phase. Accelerate is a lot of work has been done, but you're somewhat in the middle. And then the last mile is very much, I have the last few things. Generally, these things are probably the most expensive, and then I can be implementation ready. So there is no hard rule that we are going to fund one of each category. There is really no hard rule about the dollar amounts you're requesting. However, in order to kind of create apples to apples comparisons, we highly recommend that you kind of use that as a guide. So I mean, like there can always be exceptions, but really, if you want last mile funding, you're going to be most competitive if you're asking around the $750,000 range. So we want to make sure that it's clear that there are no requirements that just because you're in concept, accelerate, or last mile, you're in a more competitive space or less. But we don't want to compare a last mile to a concept. We want to compare all the concepts together, all the accelerator kind of phases together, and then all the last mile together. So project scoring criteria, this is in there. I mean, to kind of cut to the chase here, we want impact and where's the equity, right? So much of this work is around also economic equity. I think we all know, a lot of you have experience in Orange County. If not, you live in Orange County. A lot of things are great about Orange County, but not everyone's feeling kind of the wealth and prosperity of Orange County, and many people are struggling. So how can we be more targeted, more intentional in helping those who have not kind of reaped the economic benefits over the past decade, 2 decades, whatever that time period may be? So that's project impact. Equity, as you see, those are kind of the 2 biggest point buckets. The work plan, so that's the focus on the pre-development activity. When we talk about project impact, we are talking about the broader project, what that project will be. When we talk about work plan, though, it's what specifically. So what are those activities? What are those tactics that are gonna move you closer to implementation, and then have you be able to realize your project? So you have to be able to distinguish between what the project is, the goal of the project, and what its outcomes will be, versus, but I need to do, you know, this, I need to get kind of this legal paperwork done in order to move it, or I need to get this permitting done with the city. Those are going to be your pre-development activities, and those are critical because that's essentially what would you do with the money. So that's 20 points. And then we wanted to keep the bar low here on organizational qualifications and the budget, because we did not want to disadvantage kind of a smaller group in this process. But that said, we had to be responsible, and your organization should have some qualifications for doing this work. And of course, we want you to have a thought out proposed budget and budget narrative. As much as you can, you know, not necessarily, but a lot of this work probably will have to be subcontracted because it's very technical in nature. You know, that really should be clearly outlined in the work plan and in your budget narrative to do well there. Let me, for now then, give me one moment while I then toggle to a new screen to highlight certain points here. So as I mentioned, I already drove the point around equity. So you can kind of see this map here. Sorry, let me zoom in here. You'll see this map of Orange County. As we mentioned in the NOFO, this is in our website as well. So you kind of can just scroll down, but I jumped straight to it. What you see here are people of Latinx or Asian descent, some in yellow, some in red. But what you really want to go to is to map 2, 3, and 4. As you think about equity, one piece to note that if you're working with Native American or indigenous communities, it doesn't matter where they live. they're automatically disinvested community, but all other definitions are census tract focused. So this is one. So wherever you kind of see green, as you kind of zoom in here, you can kind of click in. These are either residents, or if it's like a physical project, you have to think about the physical location of where your project could be. So where you see green, or both really, you should kind of jump to where you see green or blue, or this purple, any of those census tracts qualify as a disinvested community. So when we think about equity and its impact, you should be thinking about where are those residents being served, or where those communities are being served through your project. So that's the biggest thing here. So just to say, if you're kind of out in this more gray area, when you kind of see Los Alamitos, you're going to score much lower on the equity score. But if you're moving over here towards Garden Grove or Stanton or Anaheim or Santa Ana, then either those residents are benefiting, or the project is servicing that area or located in that area, the higher equity score. That's how we'd want to look at it. Let me again stop share one more time. And the last thing I want to go over until we get into questions, I did not want to go too long in the presentation because I think we really just want to be able to answer people's questions, is let's just look at the application for this. So very clearly, 10-page max. We want to keep it simple for everybody. We don't want to overburden you. We don't want to kind of essentially like quasi disqualify people by making it too hard of an application process. But you're just picking one. Where do you think your project lives, either concept, accelerate, or last mile? If you have any questions, you can ask per the kind of jobs first email about what you think is the best place to put your category. One word answer, right? It doesn't take up much of the 10 pages. But then we talk about project impact. And so again, however many you want to use, knowing that's a 10-page max. So discuss about what your project will do, who it'll benefit, and how you're going to do it. Economic equity, go back to those maps and show us at least 24 points who's going to be benefiting once this project is up and running. But 6 points, though, of that 30 is committed to, can you prove that the people of those communities actually want this project when they talk? So is there some anecdotal evidence about people, wanting some sort of this specific business or this type of entrepreneurship training? That'd be helpful. Or have you thought about what's the process for getting community input to make sure that kind of not only if you build it, they will come, but you're building it because they want it. So some portion of that 30 will be committed to the process, the means in which that you're making sure that disinvested communities actually want this project there. As I talked about the work plan, this is really focused on the pre-development activities. So what are those? What is it that we're really funding? And then, again, make sure any supplemental funding that could be possible, because that'll in the future, because that'll show us some sustainability. As much as we can, we don't want to fund something in the pre-development phase and it dies in the pre-development phase. And then there was never real implementation. There was never really any impact. I think these dollars do allow us to be more aggressive, to kind of go for some moonshots, but at the same time, there has to be some viability tied to it. Then organizational qualifications, as I talked about. And then we go to budget narrative and budget template. Those are not necessary for the 10-page requirement. So you're really looking at 5 questions, 10 pages, where one of those questions is a one-word answer, so not taking up much space. You fill out the budget narratives, those templates are on there. And then at least one letter of reference. If you want to send more, you can. We're really only looking for one, a minimum of one, and that doesn't go against your 10 pages also. So again, I would say really at most 4 to 5 questions, 10 pages, just to keep it simple. Sorry, let me go back to the webinar here. And then right here. Maria, I don't know if you want to do these last 2 slides before we go into Q&A.
Yeah, of course. So for proposers webinar, the link to the Regional Investment Initiative informational webinar was hosted on February 7th, so just a few weeks ago. It is embedded within the slides, so if you click on that portion where it says informational webinar found here, that'll lead you straight to the YouTube video. You can also find registration details on our Jobs First page as it relates to the Community Enhancing Project webinar that will be hosted in 2 days, Friday, February 21st at 9 a.m. And someone did ask in the chat if we will be sending out these slides. We will be sending out these slides by the end of today. You'll have a follow-up email with everything that you need, including links mentioned in today's webinar. We can go to the next slide. So the Catalyst application materials can be found on our webpage under the NOFO section. Applications close on March 14, 2025 by 11:59 p.m. and must be submitted to jobsfirst@ocbc.org. Friendly reminder that incomplete applications will not be eligible, and proposals received after 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on March 14, 2025 will not be reviewed. So I would encourage you all to try to submit those early if possible. We also want to announce that we have grant writing mentors available to assist you. You are welcome to request up to 5 hours of mentorship by emailing jobsfirst@ocbc.org. I'm personally monitoring that email address. So if you want to send an email, please let me know if that's something we can support you with. And then information about Catalyst funding will continue to be released through our newsletters. If you would like to be added to the constant contact list, please send me an email at jobsfirst@ocbc.org. And then anything that is not clear in our NOFO, we do have a Q&A portion on our Jobs First webpage. We also have an FAQ document and then answers that are submitted. Questions that are submitted, we will provide answers to, and those will be updated weekly on our page while the application window remains open. So please take a look at the questions as they may have already been answered, and these may be questions that you have. And I know that was a lot of information. I'll give it back to Jesse.
Yeah, and just one thing on the grant writing mentorship, it's about guidance on how to write a strong application. They will not be writing the application for you. So I think let's make that, I just wanted to also be clear there. So if you aren't comfortable writing grants and you haven't done it a lot, that's where the resource is. They will not be able to guide you on what a good application is, like an application that will be funded will be. That's not their decision to make, but they will make sure that things are done kind of cleanly and with a best practice approach, so you have the strongest chance, given that it'll be reviewed by OCBC staff and other people. So that's the thank you. So yes, Jobs First, always have that email, always accessible beyond this webinar to help you through this process. With that, I'll stop share. I see a raised hand from Jay Luke. So Jay, go ahead. If you have a question.
No, my question was answered. Thanks, Jesse.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And there were a few questions while you were presenting, Jesse. Dr. Walrod and I addressed them. We've already answered them. So there's one left now, and it says, who should the letter of reference be addressed to?
Yeah, Orange County Business Council. Although not the biggest concern. If it was unaddressed, that's fine. We just want to be able to obviously speak that someone else can validate, your organization, you as an individual, and the work that you do.
Okay. There's a question from Jessica. If we want to work with a consultant for a concept phase proposal, does that contracted consultant need to be identified in the application?
That would, yes, in short. I mean, you don't have to, but in the sense of when you think about those 20 points, Jessica, that's showing that you've done the work. When it comes to the consultant, just because you select the consultant, there needs to be some verification from Charitable Ventures and OCBC to kind of validate, just as quality control. But the more you can do that, the more you can identify the consultant and the quote, how much it's going to cost, especially in the budget. That's a stronger application than not. So mostly yes. If you didn't have it, that's fine. You're not disqualified, but then you're going to be losing points.
Another question from Keith. It seems like a really important element of this is to create pre-development projects that then are competitive in the development phase. We've been competing in IE, and I am aware of some of the projects moving forward there. What can we do to help OC compete for that funding besides submitting strong pre-development proposals, engaging our lobbyists, engaging strong corporate partners?
I don't. That is so. It can be. There's so many ways to answer this. That's a great question, Keith. In short, saying that's not necessarily true. Especially the way that the timelines have folded out from the state. Not to get too deep on some people, that was originally the idea, that you could bring the pre-development into implementation ready. You know, the way the timelines are and there's no certainty about the budget, it's not quite as much of a guarantee that, you know, pre-development then moves over to implementation that receives funding. So I think that would be nice. However, I think it's kind of a high wire act that you're going to try to kind of get everything tied up perfectly in a bow. So what OCBC can or what the Orange County can do, can compete for that implementation funding. Well, on the lobbyist side, funding wise, we're not allowed to do that. And then, yeah, I mean, I think it's really sorry, Keith, like, and we can have this conversation offline as well, is we just don't know what's in the implementation funding to be able to answer that as far as what the state is looking for. This initiative has changed quite a bit. So I have had egg on my face way too many times for me to tell you this is what to expect from the state. So you're just gonna have to wait and see what's in there for Orange County to determine what would be a strong project from us to the state to get funded. It's a great question. It's very complicated. I don't want to go too deep because some people might be lost in that type of question.
And then on the Q&A portion, that's the only question we have so far, and we do have 2 hands raised.
Sure. So Megan.
Hi.
Hi.
So I have a question regarding the statement that you made about the equity portion with Native Americans, and you said that it didn't necessarily need to be in Orange County. Is that correct?
They need to be in Orange County, but they don't need to be in one of those census tracts. So they can be anywhere within Orange County.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. A great question. Good point of clarification.
And then Jay, is that a question or is that your hand raised from before?
Looks like it's down now.
I think he lowered it.
Jessica, then my recommendation is you probably have to be looking at the community enhancement category. Yes, it would greatly reduce your ability to get funding here, because that's part of the impact, is that it's good paying jobs. So you may want to consider looking at the community enhancement category if the wages aren't there.
I don't see any other questions. There might be typing. You also can raise your virtual hand if you have a question. Okay, I see Caitlin.
Caitlin, go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to follow up on a question I had in the chat. Dr. Wallace Walrod, he responded, but I'm just curious if you can expand a little more on if it's allowable to include multiple target sectors. So, for example, hospitals, ambulatory, and social services, like how that would look, you know, if you received an application that included multiple sectors, like, is that preferred? Or should we be only focusing on one? Like, what can you kind of give just some more, thoughts on multiple sectors?
And you're talking about, so it'd still be one project, multiple sectors?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so long as it fits those categories, if your project through its creation meets those goals, then that's a wonderful thing. So I would say, like, you're not hampered in any way if it's touching multiple, nor are you hampered if it's only focused on one. In some ways, maybe the multiple might allow you to improve your impact, because you could say that there's, I'm just throwing a number, like 50 people in each of those, and therefore the total is 150 people could potentially benefit. Like, that's where the benefit could be. But I would say that 150 people benefiting, whether it's in one or multiple, I wouldn't say it strengthens or weakens, but all is acceptable. All would be accepted and welcome. Hopefully that answers your question, but I can elaborate more.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
I don't see other hands raised, and I don't see any more questions in the Q&A box. Okay, I see Keith, hand raised.
Hey,
Hi
Keith.
all. I know you're looking at, I've seen the maps that you have around equity and the targeting sort of neighborhoods or census tracts where the highest need. Have you like looked into or do you layer in sort of maps on like social and economic mobility in those same census tracts and thinking through, you can look back, there's like resources like the Social Capital Atlas, for example, where you can really look at, again, not just like sort of the need in a community, but also looking back and seeing like, because, if you're trying to create jobs, you're trying to increase wages, you're trying to move people forward. That seems to be a big part of this, but I don't know if I saw a lot on social and economic mobility in the NOFO.
Yeah, because those maps come directly from the state. I mean, well, the census tracts come from the definition that comes directly from the state. So we did not change those. We did not add any more criteria, mainly because we wanted to not disqualify any other census tracts further. In a place like Orange County, where you could, like I would say, there are some regions of the state where their entire region, multiple counties, qualifies disinvested communities, which means they can put it anywhere. In Orange counties, you saw there are some places that absolutely just aren't. And the more criteria we layer on, then the less number of census tracts, and therefore already disqualifying, a nonprofit or whomever who's working in a certain city that probably would have otherwise. So that's where the maps come from. That's where the definitions come from. It's not OCBC's per se. We literally just carried over the state's definitions when they started this work.
And there's a question for the scoring criteria project impact. Will there be a priority based on sizes of business that create good paying jobs, such as small business versus growth firms versus large companies?
Mostly, I guess mostly no. Almost it says like we're gonna look at the quantified nature of it, primarily focused on the number of good paying, let's say, incomes tied to that work. So yeah, in some ways you could say that if it's a business and they're gonna hire like 500 people at good paying wages from people in disinvested communities versus 20 small businesses that have 2 employees, then you're probably looking at our impact is probably leaning towards the one who can have 500 good paying jobs as that employer in that sense. But we're not going to, yeah, I would say like, I don't want to kind of restrict us too much because I think some of those are hard to compare. And I think when we look at it, we'll be able to read and provide that latitude on the impact of, a cluster of small businesses versus one large business. And if you have any other questions, you kind of want to come off mute, raise your hand, and we can kind of have that conversation and dialogue. But let me try to get to the other ones first. Most of the projects specifically target a particular disinvested community, or can the project target and support people who would be underserved and disinvested but not living in a specific? So there is a little bit of latitude if you kind of look on some of the things that would have been nice to have, and there's this kind of state definition of people. So I don't have it, but there's kind of a statute that talks about kind of people of disinvested backgrounds or disadvantaged backgrounds. So to that degree that could fit, but we are going to be pretty focused on the census tracts because again, that's where the state was at. The state said the state's criteria was all about census tracts minus if you're kind of Native American or indigenous. So that's where we're going to err. But I will say that if you look in that NOFO, there are things that aren't census tract related, but speaks to maybe a person's background that will tell us that they're disinvested.
And if you all go to page 23, there's a glossary there, and it also has definition of disinvested communities in the NOFO packet.
Yeah. But I also think in the glossary, Maria, right, there's that list of like 12 different definitions of what it kind of be to be disadvantaged. So you can lean into that as well if you feel like your project isn't really census tract centered.
There's another
Yeah.
one from Jessica.
Yeah, I don't want to get like into each individual people's proposals because I think we could have that offline, but yes, sure, Jessica, yes.
Okay, and then Natalie just dropped the NOFO packet link in the chat. So If you'd all like to take a look at that, I recommend that you read through it. And then also the FAQ and the Q&A link that I sent to all of you at sometime this morning. Thank you, Natalie, for helping us with that. I don't see any other hands raised or Q&A. You're welcome, Caitlin. Okay, I do see an anonymous attendee. When you approve the grant, you'll write a check for one time of the whole approved amount, or you divide it into smaller amounts. What ending against fall into what category? They might want to come off.
Yeah, I mean, no, like well, I mean, Natalie can chime in as well, but it is going to be it is reimbursable. It's going to be a kind of a reimbursable model. So if, let's say, you have to have some sort of consultant or technical assistance, once they show you their work, you kind of pass that along, and then charitable ventures will, I'm sorry, step in. You either will pay the the consultant directly, or pay the org to pay the consultant. But that's kind of, so if you were to be awarded $500,000, you're not getting the check once the contract is signed for $500,000. But Natalie, please expand.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this information should be outlined in your budget as well. For work that is for this program, should it be a not to exceed amount, an hourly rate, or a payment schedule, we'd have to know that information in advance. And like Jesse had alluded to, this is a cost reimbursement grant, so expenses would have to be fronted first, and then we reimburse based on our contract with the state, where they reimburse us as well.
And then reimbursement language is on page 20 of the NOFO.
Yeah, so, and for this next question, I think if you could email the jobs first with maybe more detail on it, then I think we can answer again which category, whether it's job creating or community enhancement, but also if it's about phases, where that would be. So I would just recommend, if it's about your project specifically, if you could just email us at that jobs first, and we can try to, with more detail, give you the right advice. Any other not even last, any questions or comments? Yeah, I think Maria, we'll try to put this in writing as well and upload it. And at the end of each week, we upload the Q&A, as Maria mentioned. So a lot of these will go into that.
Okay, Jessica, how many applications do you anticipate receiving?
There's no number there. We did a preliminary survey. And Maria, you might know the number better than myself. I think there were over 50, right?
Yeah, like 57, I think.
57, but some of those were implementation ready, and so they wouldn't really fit. But some general interest has been to that number. Other regions, it's kind of varied. I think although one region, although to be honest, they did all 9 million available at once. They had something like over 130 applications, while other regions, because they might be smaller in nature by population size, they had like 30. So probably somewhere in between there, Jessica.
And then the next question, can you please describe what is expected for the reference letter? So you'll find that on page 13, just their name, email, and phone number, a summary of your capacity to deliver the type of work outlined in your proposal, and your ability to meet reporting requirements and adhere to the approved budget.
Yeah, and in short, just like we need a third-party validator that, the person applying can do the work, that they say they're going to do. Their trusted character and all that stuff. That's essentially it.
And I see a hand raised, Alberto.
Go ahead, Alberto.
Yes, if I can follow up. So you're saying that the letter can just be as short as repeating the 3 lines that are expected and saying yes, 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 and that's it? Or do you need more explanation and documentation of addressing each of those points?
Yeah, there needs to be some narrative. Again, we don't need it to be like 5 pages of someone attesting to your character and your ability to deliver, but just, I think what most people consider normal or standard letter of rec, whether you're applying for a job or applying for grants, something that's a paragraph or 2 of someone speaking to your capabilities and your character.
And is that of the lead or of the organization? The character of the lead, the person who's submitting, or of the organization they're representing?
Primarily around the organization, but if they also want to lean in on that is helpful as well.
And
Yeah.
from what entities should the letter be coming from?
There is no restriction, just someone who would be able to write it. Yeah, just someone. Yeah, there are no restrictions. There are no restrictions there. Just we
So
want a third-party validator.
If I can follow up, so for example, I'm a fiscally sponsored project.
Okay.
My fiscal sponsor knows my operations really well.
Mhm.
It seems like it's a bit of a conflict of interest that they're not that objective, since they would be the ones receiving the money, as opposed to some completely outside entity.
Yeah, great question. Again, and that's like there's we would say a third-party validator. So someone who does not have skin in the game to some extent when it comes to this work, but someone who you have partnered with or worked with so they could speak to your work. That's a good distinction. Thank you for bringing that up. Jessica, no. Again, back to kind of maybe Alberto's point, we don't, a letter from someone who's going to get some funding out of this is a little hollow. So that won't be necessary generally, but also to his point, should be focused on someone who doesn't have skin in the game when it comes to how this gets funded. Should be, yes. Yes, and honestly, you've absolutely nailed it. Not an implementation ready project. There is some room for pilot, but if you're in implementation, you have to wait for that funding from the state, which is why I led with that, because I think so many people's projects are more on the implementation ready side. And we are a large educational institution. Does the reference need to be an external reference, or like could our chancellor write it? It should be a third party. All great questions. Thank you. Great question, Keith. Correct me if I'm wrong, Maria, if you see it up there, like there is a section already for that. So if you have partners, so that was if you have partners, we do want something in writing that they are indeed partners. So Keith, I think that kind of answers your question. So they will not be providing letters of rec, but if you're going to say that we have a partnership with so-and-so, we need them in writing to say, yes, we have agreed to this. And so people aren't just kind of making things up or going to fake it till they make it. And then, oh, now I have the funding. Now can you partner with me? So there needs to be some MOU, not even that formal, just something in writing that says, yes, we've agreed to be a partner with, Big Brothers, Big Sisters to execute this work. If whether they're receiving funding or not. So they could be partners that don't receive funding, or they could be receiving funding. Any other questions? Thank you for this. I would say like we have the jobs first, Maria's on it every day. So don't feel like you have to there's not going to be another webinar, but you should, if you had this question, a week ago, you just answer it then. If you have questions that come up anytime, to just email us. Don't feel like you have to wait for something like a call to ask them. Please, we are responsive and we want to get you the answers you need so you can do your job and write strong applications. Right, we do list, pretty much everyone is eligible minus like an individual. So long as you have some sort of legal standing, whether you're a business or a nonprofit, that's all we ask for. So I wouldn't say it's mainly for nonprofits. It's really going to come down to, again, project impact and equity and some of those other things. So there's no preferential group of entities over others.
You're welcome,
Oh,
Jessica.
yeah,
Thanks
no,
for
you're
all the
very
questions
welcome.
you asked.
Yeah, hope you're doing well.
And again, where you would send the email to is jobsfirst@ocbc.org.
Yeah, if you're already dropping in the chat, maybe that'll help also. Alberto, you have another question?
Yeah, I have a follow-up about that MOU comment. So
Yeah.
that would be part of the 10 pages or
No, it would not be part of your 10 pages. The
so
10
that's
pages
sort of like
are
the
really,
extra letters.
yes, that's why there's supplemental stuff. Like if you want to have more than one letter, like that's not going to go against your 10 pages. It's really that first question. And then I think the following 5 really, everything about budget, letter of references, all that MOU does not go against your 10 pages.
And then the MOU expectation really limits the type of applications because there hasn't been much time between the announcement and when this deadline is. And some of our potential partners are really slow moving institutions. So we need the MOU by the time of the application deadline or like let's
Yes.
say before.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, again, we need to verify, and again, MOU is a way to do it. If you have slow moving institution, well, okay, I can't speak. It's like, but the point is, it doesn't need to be as formalized as an MOU, but you just kind of need something in writing and signed saying that yes, we agree to work within this project or to enable this project or to advance this project to some degree. Essentially, we don't want someone stating that they have all these people who are going to help and it's going to be such a great project, only to find out once we get to funding things, it was essentially a lie, right? That's what we want to avoid.
Yeah, I can understand how you would want something more formal, but I'm speaking at least for myself. Most of us have relationships with individuals who work at companies. The individual is going to be interested, but if you need the approval of the institution, then that's going to really slow things down because it's got to go through legal and so on. And so the expectation of having something signed on behalf of the institution would limit the amount of potential applications, is my opinion.
I think we can have that conversation offline specifically about what project you have in mind and why those MOUs are necessary and who then would need to sign on to that MOU.
Okay.
But I would recommend that Maria will respond to that email right away and we can try to address your concerns.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. All right, how's it different from the one on Friday? So the webinar on Friday will be specific to, because if you look at the NOFO, there's 2 different types of categories. This is about the good paying jobs, hence kind of, right? One, it's about the industry sectors and the quality of the job being created, which is why we talked a little bit about those slides. Community enhancement's a little bit broader. It may not have that good job requirement, but it's still important to some sort of economic prosperity, but they could also be around climate resilience. It could be around housing. There are things that, of course, I think impact a lot of people's quality of life beyond their job or kind of what they do for work. And so that's our ability to address that funding. We won't go too far into that. It's in the NOFO, and we welcome you to attend that as well for you to understand maybe your project is better fit in a different category than this one. It's very much possible.
And I just dropped the registration link to Friday's webinar in the chat too.
And if you want, you can email us and we can help you, decide on, where your project would be strongest between the 2 categories. Hey, last call.
There's another one. Can the one write MOU, or can the person that writes the MOU be the same person with letter of reference?
That would be frowned upon. I can't say no exactly because again, I think there's always case by case basis. However, again, I think if they're participating in this, they kind of have an incentive to say that you're capable of doing the work. So we just want someone who you've worked with that may not be involved in this project that yes, like I've worked with them on this. They're very capable to do this work as well. I think that, again, it could be case by case. So I don't want to say a hard no. I would advise looking for somebody else though in that process.
Would it be possible to get a copy of all of the questions and answers from this Q&A session?
Yep, right. That's the plan. That's why we record it and we post not only the questions from this webinar, but people who email us questions throughout the week. So Monday through Thursday, we got a set of questions. It's being published on Friday, and then we're adding to that list with these webinars included in that. Other questions? Okay, I think we'll maybe give it 10 more seconds, Maria. If we don't see anything, then we can adjourn and we'll get this. She'll work on it. And Maria is great at this stuff. She's an incredibly hard worker. I'm sure she'll get it out as soon as she possibly can. Believe me. Anything else? These are all great questions.
You all should turn off your notifications though, because you will be getting emails late at night.
Yeah. Anything? Okay, if not, again, we have that jobs first email. Please email us. So again, we can get you those answers promptly. Don't feel like you have to wait an extended amount of time. Let's get you the answers you need so you can get to the grant writing. But good luck, everybody. Looking forward to seeing your applications. Take care.